in that process. A lot of groups were established over many years, I must say. And I'd like to thank anybody on this particular call who was part of that activity, that developmental activity, in getting us to the stage of having these draft standards. It took a lot of effort. As I say, there were many groups, a lot of people. Some people replaced other people over the time frame, because we're talking about a couple of years at this stage. So there's a lot of consideration given to it. Internally, there was a bit of change as well. People moved from one role to another. So there was a lot of brain power put into the development of what we finally launched. The other acknowledgement is that in the time frame of when this started, or when this was conceived, even to when we launched them, or even now, a lot of things happened in the environment in which we all work. In terms of qualifications and quality assurance, providers over that time, I think, have got much more mature. They've been in the business for a long time, and they're a lot more, and I'm talking to yourselves, ambitious about the programs. We're picking up through the validation process that we get a lot more innovative, different type of programs that don't conform to CAS, the system that we have there at the moment, particularly at these levels. So there's a lot more innovation in the system than the current awarding system facilitates. And this launch of these broad standards at levels 1 to 4 is an innovation. It is a new approach for these levels. It's not a new approach for the whole system, but it is a new approach for these levels. And we hope that it meets the needs of what you're presenting, in particular through our validation process and the different type of programs that you are developing for your needs and for your learners. Other things that have happened in that time frame is that we now have many more apprenticeships than we did before. I know they're at different levels, level 5 and up the framework, but the methodology behind the development of the apprenticeships is similar to the use of these broad standards. They allow for more holistic programs. They allow for doing things different ways. They are, again, non-CAS. They facilitate what's needed in the sector. We hope they do, or they seem to do, facilitates what's needed in the sector between a partnership between the education part, the system, and the employer part for the purpose of the apprenticeships. We also have the emergence or the evolution of micro-credentials, which is also evidenced that a lot more innovation and enhancement is needed to the qualification standards to facilitate that development, because a lot of those are coming through a non-CAS process, basically linked to the framework, to the standards behind the original framework, or generic standards and so forth. So the new type of program that's being developed, whether it's apprenticeship or seems to be the new type of program that's being developed, whether it's apprenticeship or micro-credentials, is based on your needs and your learners' needs, meeting with industry and so on, and it's not currently facilitated by CAS. CAS itself will, over time, hopefully starting next year, will be reviewed. And what we hope we will have by the end of that, in a sense, is options for providers. The use of the broad standards when it facilitates, and the use of CAS when it facilitates, hopefully in a revised and refreshed format. But again, we will go through a consultation process on that, and we'll hear what your views are and how you would like that to evolve going forward. But what we're talking about today is an innovation. It's an alternative option. It's not replacing the existing CAS. I just want to clarify that. It's not replacing it. It's a new enhanced option for providers to develop programs based on what they want and what you want and what your needs are in terms of meeting your cohort of learners. And again, the evidence we're getting is that that's what's coming through validation at the moment. There's other things going on at the sector at the moment, including, and you may be aware of it, the Minister for Further and Higher Education launched recently an approach, the department's approach, or a national approach, to a unified tertiary system, which is looking at VET, or further ed, in the context of higher ed and progression. Not exclusively, but it's another feature that I think impacts on what we're doing today in terms of the launch of these broad standards, which gives different options to providers to enable learners to progress, maybe from levels 1 to 4, all the way up the system. So the broad standards does offer a new opportunity. And we hope that in terms of after today, or after you read the documentation from the consultation process, that you'll see that opportunity in terms of your own setting, your own learners and so forth, in terms of developing more innovative and evolutionary programs that may meet your needs and is not restricted by the caste system. And it's up to you then. The offer is that you can decide what you want in your qualification, what you want in your standard. And the broad standards are a reference to support that. And there's many of them. There's 20, give or take, of these standards. And the intention is not that you use them all or that you use all of the content of even one of them. You can use them to meet your own needs. There's a different ways of reading them, and there's different ways of using them, and hopefully we'll get some of that across today, either through our presentations or by your questions. You can use more than one, and some of the presenters will go through that today, but I just want to make sure that what's on offer today, we can elaborate on it either through this process and or the questions as they come. Is there any questions anybody would like to ask at this point before I hand over? No. All right. I'd like to hand over to one of my colleagues, John. I have a number of colleagues on the call. Maybe they'll introduce themselves as they go on, but I'd like to hand over to my colleague, John O'Connor, who's head of qualification standards and certification in QQI. And I think he's the first person to come in to present the consultation process. Thanks, John.
Thanks very much, Barbara, and good morning, everyone. And I have a few slides, but not too many. So I'll try and just share these. And Alga, you might just give me a yes or no in my ear. Tell me that's okay.
Yes, perfect, John.
Okay. Yeah, John O'Connor. I've met some of you before. It's great to have a good turnout on a cold morning on Friday morning. Obviously, everyone's busy and providers are very busy. And I used to work in a provider for a good long time, so I know what it's like teaching, assessing, and then working on the quality assurance side of thing in a provider, getting programs designed, validating them then with bodies, and doing this. And then when you go to a consultation like this, then you're thinking, well, what's new? And you're thinking, what's it going to mean for me and my providers? Will I be doing things differently? What help is going to be available? Will it be clear? Will there be templates and supports available? And will it be worth it? Is it a useful thing that QQI are consulting on? Will it improve things ultimately for learners? And so we will talk about and the consultation is on the broad standards and 1 to 4. And I mean, those of you who are on this call this morning know the importance of levels 1 to 4. I mean, I know there's lots of talk about other levels in the framework and skills and progression to higher education and all that kind of conversation, but levels 1 to 4 are foundational levels in the national system. They're absolutely fundamental for lifelong learning and getting levels 1 to 4. And there's a huge amount of interests and values and perspectives on levels 1 to 4, really rich area or territory for qualifications. And we're quite unusual internationally too. I mean, many countries don't have qualifications, especially at our levels 1 and 2. Most systems qualifications start at, let's say, the end of compulsory education and training, which is basically around our levels 3. So we've got a really good opportunity here with these levels in the framework. And that idea of foundational levels, I think, is better language. Sometimes people talk about lower levels and things like that, but these foundational levels, very rich, hugely important in the context of lifelong learning. But I thought what would be useful, the consultation, you get into the consultation and we'll see what the offer is and what is different and how do these things look different. And there's always a number of technical things, and people want to see, well, how do I design a program using these new standards? What about credit? What about titling? What about accumulation of learning over time using these standards? What about progression and mobility? What about certification of these? And they're all very legitimate questions, and we have to work through those. technical elements of this. But at the heart of this is a suite of learning outcomes. And we have to look at this. There's no point in us having wonderful technical systems for validating, making awards, certifying, if the qualifications that we have and the standards for the qualifications aren't fit for purpose. And the learning outcomes is at the heart of this. And we have to, so the consultation is about the learning outcomes for sure. It's also about the technical stuff, about the implementation of these qualification standards. And I use the word qualification standards. People say award standards. It's the same thing. We use the word qualification and awards synonymously for this purpose and in terms of the qualifications framework. So we really do want the consultation to really help us look at the learning outcomes and tell us, do you think we're about right with the learning outcomes that are there? Are they relevant? Is this a useful expectation for learners at these levels? And yes, tell us about what our thinking on the implementation and the use of these standards. Tell us what we're saying that is clear, what we're saying that's not clear, and what we're not saying at all, and what we need to say about the implementation. But I wouldn't like to get too caught up in the technical implementation. I know from a provider's point of view, and I know I would have thought like that, and how is this going to work? We have to get providers, and particularly teachers and trainers, subject matter experts, have to tell us and confirm yes or no, or partly, or the extent to which the learning outcomes are fit for purpose. So I'll just go a few slides here, just telling you a little bit of some reflections about qualification standards, award standards we're going to be looking at, but why do we have award standards at all? And why do they look the way they do, and how did we get here? And I think it's important that Barbara said that this isn't an overnight success. Far from it. I mean, this goes back to initial consultation on levels 1 to 3 in 2016, I think, a wider consultation in 2018 on our approach to award standards more generally across the framework. And then bringing groups together again, and we're very grateful for many of you on the call and others, providers, teachers, subject matter experts, and other users, whether they're employers or higher education or other users of qualifications, who would have assisted in the development of these draft award standards. So that gives us a lot of confidence that they're there or thereabouts, but obviously we have to confirm that with the widest possible constituency. But I'll give a few thoughts about qualifications standards, award standards, and so that I suppose a world view on these that we can bring when we're looking at this consultation. We can bring some of this. So the technical piece is very important, but when you're looking at these award standards, some things to maybe think about. And I suppose a part of the logic of this is, I mean, why do standards look? Why do we have standards? Whether they're common award system (CAS) or they're these new broad standards, why do we describe award standards or qualification standards in terms of knowledge, skill, and competence? And that's the structure we use. And there could be other structures, but the one we use is knowledge, skill, and competence. And that really comes from the qualifications framework, a 10-level system that you're familiar with, which isn't a straitjacket. And it's not meant to be a straitjacket or a top-down straitjacket constraining provider initiative or innovation or responsiveness. It was, and I'll quote the legislation at the time, it's for the development and recognition of qualifications. So we need to look at the framework as a tool for helping us develop and recognizing world-class qualifications. And there's a number of features in this toolkit that we have here. You'll see award types. A number of those are on the framework. I mean, the level 5 certificate, level 2 certificate, they're award types. You'll see levels. There are 10 different levels, and at each level you got published descriptors on the knowledge, skill, and competence for a level. They can be useful enough, but they don't tell you anything about a particular course or area of education and training. They're neutral or generic. The award types to a level 3 certificate descriptor will tell you the knowledge, skill, and competence expectations for a level 3 certificate, but not in any particular area or field of learning. And then you'll see in there 2 classes of awards. And so you'll see, well, there are major award types. Level 3 certificate is an example, level 2 certificate, but are also non-major award types. And you'll see minor awards, supplemental awards, special purpose, and more recently professional awards. And these are toolkits. So if I was designing programs or qualifications, I'd be saying, let's get a great program together. Let's see what the knowledge skill, let's see who's it for. Let's look at the demand for this program. Let's draft the knowledge, skill, and competence for this program. And then I'll be thinking, Is it a minor award? Is it a major award type? What level is it at? So I'd be thinking almost of these things. I wouldn't be starting off with these kind of things and having this kind of a top-down approach. I'd be designing great programs and then looking at the toolkit we have, and then things like credit, the learning outcomes in the module, and obviously many of you are familiar with them, with going through a validation process on that basis. But framework, I think of it as a toolkit, but importantly, it does say that qualification standards need to be expressed in terms of knowledge, skill, and competence. And that's why what you'll see, whether it's in the Common Award System or in the new broad standards or the professional award type descriptor where it's used, you'll see that construction, that conceptual underpinning of a qualification standard sets out what we think graduates should know, understand, and be able to do at a particular level in the framework. But framework is important part of the infrastructure and very important part for when we're thinking about qualification standards. Because an award standard, if you look in here, you'll see the QQI award standards. And I'll talk about the kinds of ones that we have at the moment. This is where we publish an award standard. Many of you will be familiar with the Common Awards system, which has generated a large number of standards. And you can see in a certificate specification, you'll see the expected knowledge, skill, and competence. That's effectively a QQI award standard that will be used to govern and approve programs linked to that particular standard. But where we publish these award standards, and we do it in higher education and we do it in further education, these are an important connection between the qualifications framework, which is in some ways up there someplace in the ether, setting the kind of the broad framework for qualifications development. And then you have learners who get certificates from QQI. And then you have providers develop programs with award standards. Where there's a useful award standard in place, they'll develop a program with regard to that qualification standard. So QQI publish a qualification standards. The provider will have a look at the standard and say, that's helping me to develop this program. It's giving me some good guidance, or it's not giving me such good guidance, and I might not pay so much attention to it. And we see some evidence of that happening too. But in theory, we have the framework. QQI publishes award standards. Providers look at QQI award standards and they give a good guidance on the development of a useful program. They're not standardizing programs. They're not intended to do that, but it gives good enough guidance to assist providers to develop world-class programs, and also allows QQI to know that there's enough consistency across various programs with comparable learning outcomes, but not standardized, but enough consistency or comparability across the system. Providers may have a program, they may develop courses for particular groups from that program that respond to particular cohort learner needs, and ultimately learners get a certificate. So there's this important connection. Award standards have a bridging function, I suppose, between an individual qualification that an individual gets and the qualifications framework. And that's useful for the individual learner. Really useful or important for an individual learner. Another way of maybe showing this is this kind of, again, I shouldn't be showing this kind of presentation. It looks a bit top down, hyperlinear, going from the framework level indicators, award type to standards. So an award type standard is a level 3 certificate descriptor, but it's the generic one, an award type standard, and that's part of the framework. Then QQI might develop a level 3 certificate in whatever it might be. And that's a QQI award standard. And you'll be familiar with a lot of those at those levels in FET are designed and determined using the Common Award system. And then you have program standards, which are important. So, and program standards can be derived from or developed with regard to QQI award standards. But we are seeing some evidence too of providers saying, well, we've had a look at we've had a look for a QQI award standard in a particular area. We don't see one, but we need to develop a program in this particular area. So we're going to use the award type standard or the level indicators. We're going to use that to connect the program to the qualifications framework to ensure there's no doubts about the recognition for the learner. So it clearly does lead to a qualification that's included in the National Framework of Qualifications. Or we see an award standard that QQI have and we think that's out of date. That's not current enough. I'm going to use it, okay, and reference it, but I'm kind of going to improve on it, or my program is going to actually go beyond this award standard and improve on it. because there's been lots of changes in the sector system or the demands of the skills requirements. And so, as Barbara said, we accept that especially the Common Award system, we've got effectively standard certificate specifications that haven't been maintained, and there are doubts about the currency of the learning outcomes in a number of those, and that's partly explains the logic behind developing this complementary alternative system of award standards, because of the datedness of the Common Award system standards and the demands on QQI and the system to be able to maintain the currency of such a large suite of unitized qualification standards. This idea of standards, and this shouldn't be just, and this can be upwards as well. Programs can in many ways set the standard and have been doing that in some areas. But just, I think it's important to, and learning outcomes, knowledge, skill, and competence, again, that's the lexicon, that's the way we express level indicators. And program standards, programs, you'll be familiar with program learning outcomes and module learning outcomes. You can see that learning outcomes are the glue that hold this kind of system together between the certificate that an individual gets and that qualification being included in the qualifications framework. And then there'd be no doubt about the national and international recognition of that particular qualification. So qualification standards, I suppose, have a number of functions. And when you're looking at the qualification standards that we have, that we're published recently for consultation, think about those kind of things. Is that a qualification standard should add to the quality of qualifications. It should lead to better qualifications, to lead to good qualifications that are fit for purpose. So there's a quality dimension of award standards. I mean, it's difficult for qualifications and programs to exceed the quality of the award standards that an awarding body may be making available. Not impossible, but difficult. So there's a connection there. Good award standards are necessary for the development of world-class qualifications and programs. So there's a quality dimension. And so when you're looking at our award standards, do you think they assist in the development? Do they support the development of world-class programs at these particular levels? So there's a quality dimension to qualification standards. There's a recognition dimension, because it's the use of award standards. You connect a certificate or an individual's qualification with the qualifications framework. So they secure or they anchor a certificate or a qualification within the national framework. So there's a strong recognition function. So we probably can't do without them, because that's really important. And then I suppose maybe more for us, for QQI, but award standards allow a regulator like us or an awarding body to be able to provide public assurances around consistency and comparability. Enough consistency and comparability across the system. So we can say that a similar sounding qualification coming out of this provider is broadly comparable with the similar sounding qualification coming out of that provider. Or we can say that qualification standards since 2010 are broadly comparable with qualification standards that are coming out of the system in 2022. So those kind of consistency, comparability, let's say benchmarking function of standards, more perhaps in the work of QQI, but also something that will be of interest to providers and definitely in the interest of learners. So those kind of functions of standards, quality, making better qualifications, recognition, and consistency, they're all good for providers and good for QQI, but ultimately they're all good for learners. Learners benefit from good quality qualifications, they benefit from recognition, and they benefit from consistency and comparability. So there's no doubts. We don't want education training providers or employers saying, yeah, we understand these qualifications, but we like the one from this provider, and we have concerns about the ones in this provider. So that's not in the interest of learners. So award standards, think about the benefits for, yes, there are implications for us, and we have to do things with them, and there are demands on us in implementing standards and developing them. But ultimately, we think about them in terms of their influence on the learner's experience. And so, yes, Barbara hinted at this. There's been some changes, particularly around the further education and training areas, and the Common Award system standards. You'd be familiar with that, highly prescriptive, and some very attractive features you can see. And providers are concerned about, well, especially the accumulation piece. How can you accumulate, and especially smaller? But The idea that you can have qualifications for smaller volumes of learning, that's not gone. If that's still useful, that's fine, because you have the framework tools. You have I like minor awards or whatever it might be. There's nothing wrong with building programs. You can build major programs, or you can build smaller programs, or smaller programs leading to major programs. You have the toolkit. You don't necessarily need a common award system to do that. The framework tools are available there as recognition tools, and providers decide, well, what is a coherent group of learning outcomes that are worthwhile and as a package, and that I do want to make available as a qualification for this cohort of learners. And that's really a provider decision. You know your learners well, but I mean, there isn't a risk to that. People maybe say, well, common award system, if that's less prevalent and new broad standards are in there, is there a threat to the accumulation model? Now, there are elements of the common award system where there's automatic or automated accumulation across the system, and we do need to think about that, where it's not just beyond an issue of providing recognition, smaller qualifications for smaller batches of learning, but that kind of national system of automated accumulation, which kind of QQI support through our learner management and certification system. Is there anything that we risk losing there if we start using broad standards, and how can we make sure that so there's lots of good things in CAS, and as Barbara said, there isn't a cliff edge coming up around the common award system, but we do need to ease the pressure on it, and in some ways the level 1 to 4 offer eases the pressure, but it's complementary, it's alternative. We like to see people start using it. We won't risk learners or that. We have enough toolkits, regulatory tools to make sure we won't risk. This isn't a dangerous experiment in using this. We're trying to take some pressure off CAS, but we're also trying to respond to demands for qualification standards that support more flexibility, innovation, responsiveness, agility in terms of the qualifications offer that providers are centrally responsible for. So we have a lot of CAS. We have about 1,700 of those in various, all fields of education, training at those levels. We have this idea of non-CAS, which I'm not really enamored with the title of non-CAS, but let's say kind of more open standards. You see it, for example, apprenticeships don't use CAS, whether in FE. You'll see the ELC, early learning and care programs that are developed at levels 5 and 6. They're not using the common award system. They're quite detailed standards, but they're not using the common award system. And so they're free from some of maybe the rules around that. And you'll also see providers saying, like I said before, QQI don't have a standard in this area, published standard in this area, or the standard they have isn't good enough. And I'm going to develop the standard through developing a program. And then that becomes the award standard. So there's that route in there too. And we're alert to that, and we're seeing that happen. So the levels 1 to 4, you could say, is another example of a non-CAS award standard, and they've been offered on that basis. Now they're not intended to replace CAS. They're meant to be as an alternative, reduce some of the pressure, take some of the pressure off us as an awarding body in terms of trying to maintain this extensive suite of standards, which again came from the bottom up and came from provider-owned programs and qualifications initially. To be honest, it's proving difficult to maintain the currency and relevance of those, and there's demands on us coming from a number of different places, and not least from providers saying we want to be able to develop more faster, responsive, flexible qualifications. And so levels 1 to 4 offer is part of that. But just there is a variety of the way we do standards, and some of those are more general and some of them are more tightly prescribed. And again, I'm not making any judgment on qualifications and how they should be developed, but just looking across a number of countries and awarding bodies and the way qualifications have been developed, you can look at qualification standards in terms of, well, are they loose at the top, more open, a little bit like the level 1 to 4 we have, or are they very tightly prescribed, like plenty of examples in the common award system are at the bottom of that continuum? And that's not a bad thing. Prescriptive standards, not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, if you're any kind of a regulated area, and we have them in, you could be doing gas boiler maintenance, something like that, and there's a good argument for having tightly prescribed standards. The school qualifications, they're very tightly prescribed and stable and don't change a lot over time. and especially the academic school qualifications, because they're often progressing into higher education, and they're very stable and enduring, and the curriculum is not very frequently updated, and it works fine. But there is some demand for more flexible open standards. And then you got demand-led. Who's involved in who should be influencing kind of standards? So the supply-led, provider-driven, demand-led, social partners, users of qualifications, further education training institutions that might be taking on graduates from particular levels. Should they have a say? Should employers have a great say? Should trade unions, social partners, peak bodies, regulators, professional bodies? And for anything that's vocationally oriented, and I'm not going to talk particularly about, and especially at levels 1 to 4. You have to be careful here that we're not saying this is a skills agenda. There's a huge number of important values and purpose of qualifications at levels 1 to 4, which are not about or primarily about skills, work, and employability. Yeah, they're important, but we're not. At least I don't think, and I think QQI thinks. I mean, there's a huge amount of social inclusion, other really important enriching values that we're really trying to promote by qualification at this level. But where a qualification is vocationally oriented, you're starting to see this direction of travel, is that qualification standards need to be more open and flexible, and they need to be more demand-led. Users of qualifications have to have a central role in their design, their development, their review, their quality assurance, maybe even in the delivery and assessment. And so you see this, again, this is an observation, just looking across the international literature and practice elsewhere. But it won't be a surprise to you to probably see that in terms of a trajectory of travel in terms of qualification standards or award standards development. Some context on this, won't dwell too long, but there's a lot of this, and a lot of these policies came out after we started work on the levels 1 to 4. But you can see that the levels 1 to 4, the broad standards that you're looking at the moment, they are well aligned. They don't go against the grain of these kind of important policy context in the FET strategy, the Adult Literacy for Life strategy, our own department strategy. And there's a European recommendation in there too for key competencies for lifelong learning. So a European recommendation gets signed up by ministers here. And so there's a strong political mandate that we needed to do something in terms of embedding key competencies for lifelong learning in the qualifications that we have to offer. So there's a number of pointers there. But again, all really strong on lifelong learning. I think that's a powerful idea, particularly at level 4, not just at levels 1 to 4, but particularly at levels 1 to 4, that interest in enabling opportunities and enabling people to navigate the system, to find opportunities for learning outcome, and giving people the capacity to be lifelong learners within the system. So a lot of stuff there. The adult will get in more into the detail on this, but the offer at the moment, and some of you, and the response rate is taken away on the system. Providers, great, hugely important to have providers looking at this consultation. Yes, there are lots of other users that will have an interest in this consultation. Providers are absolutely central. And in providers, I kind of make two distinctions from my own background. I used to do a bit of quality assurance. I was part of the bureaucracy in a provider at one stage, that kind of registrar role. And so you have a particular view on things like standards, what do they mean for program design, validation, technical kind of stuff. But then I remember being a teacher as well, and teachers and trainers, they're critical to, and we're not very well connected with them. And so if we can kind of encourage teachers and trainers to have a look at these broad standards, because they know about their learning outcomes, they're looking at their learning outcomes and saying, yeah, they're the kind of expectations we'd like to have for our learners, because that's crucial, because, okay, there are always technical pieces of qualifications, but if they aren't accepted, if they don't kind of touch on a consensus or an agreement that this is what the professionals want, teachers and trainers, the subject matter experts, their professional judgment is crucial, and they'll help us in looking at these standards. Co-created, as Barbara said, we didn't pick these out of the air, and these are co-produced with providers and with relevant peak bodies. So we've got a good bit of confidence that they're thereabouts in terms of learning outcomes, but we'd like that to be confirmed. You'll see a mix of pre-vocational standards at levels 3 and 4, and you'll see standards for these core competencies for lifelong learning. And these are a significant development, again, inspired by the European recommendation, but also by lots of policy texts here that a lot of times we talk about lifelong learning, and it's a nice kind of buzzword around the place, but really, how do we embed that, and how do we ground and root qualifications at these levels in these kind of lifelong learning competencies, and equip people with the necessary skills and competence to be lifelong learners, and to be able to navigate then through the system, looking for good quality lifelong learning opportunities. The consultation process is seeking views on the learning outcomes. That's really important, to separation between what are these standards fit for purpose. So you're looking at the learning outcomes. Are they about right at the level? Are they pitched at the right level? Are they relevant? Really important things for us to know about. And with your provider hat on, if you had one of these standards, could you say that gives me enough? I can deal with all the technical side of stuff, that's separate, but this standard is giving me enough guidance to develop a good program. It's giving me enough parameters. It's a useful reference point to develop a really good program. That's an important call that we need to get. And then we have also published guidelines on the implementation of the draft award standards, and we try to tackle things like titling, like use of CAS alongside these award standards, like certification, like credit systems, like assessment, grading, the kind of technical things that providers, some people in providers will need to keep an eye on. And so again, particularly providers telling us, well, is that clear enough, the guidance that we have? Is it, where does it need to be enhanced, and where have we missed? What have we missed in terms of the guidance? There's also a background document there for people like to know, well, how did we get here in the first place? So it goes back through some of the earlier versions of the consultation. So again, this isn't an overnight success, but some people like the context piece. So there's a background document there, not for consultation, but just to give people in terms of full transparency about how we got here. The consultation is open until 15th of February, 2023. And it's online, and Beata will talk you through it in a moment. But again, so there you have on the right hand side there, these are, let's say, pre-vocational, to be more specific, award standards in those 10 different areas, from ICT, horticulture. So you'll see broad standards there. These don't look like the common award system. These look different. These are a list of knowledge, skill and competence expectations across the relevant levels of the framework, and that's all you're looking at. There's no rules attached to them. It's just looking at those learning outcomes. And the core competence standards then, those 10, predominantly derived from a EU recommendation on embedding core competence skills in education and training. And this is our contribution to that, to addressing the requirements of that. But also it's been bubbling away, and there's plenty of experts on this call will understand lifelong learning, the importance of these levels for lifelong learning. And these are the kinds of things we should be embedding. And again, when you look at these, you'd also think about, well, why stop at levels 4? I mean, if sustainability competence and digital competence, and these are fundamental competencies for living and working today, why would they stop at? Should we be thinking about going beyond levels 4 with these kind of things that continue? But also, these kind of space kind of make me think about transversal skills. How should these kind of things be used? Are they standards for, you could develop a program meeting to one of these standards, or should they be embedded, integrated into a program? Elements of them could be used, and so we're definitely open, and we don't claim to have all the answers about how these might be used. And I'm gonna try and leave it there at that, and that's so that just gives you kind of a bit of background, some of QQI's views on qualification standards, about why we do this and why we do it this way. This is a change for sure. We think it's a good change. We think it's well informed. We're glad it's had the input of providers for the last few years in developing it. And we're looking forward to people telling us what they think. We don't have a monopoly of wisdom on this. We're looking forward to people trying these out in an experimental kind of way and seeing how they work. We won't put learners at a disadvantage in terms of taking those experiments and pilot schemes that you'll hear about in a moment. But I'll hand over to Beata at the moment, who'll talk you a little through the actual consultation that we have published recently. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, John. Good morning, everyone. And my name is Beata. I'm the manager of the award standards. We are very happy that you have joined us today, as John said, on busy Friday morning. We are a little bit behind our schedule, so I'm going to keep it quite short, but I would like today to basically explain different options of responding to our consultation, because I'm not sure if all of you had a chance to visit the website. It's on the public consultation webpage on QQI website. you will find a couple of different consultations. One of them is a consultations on the broad level standards on levels 1 to 4. So basically, there's a nice introduction that will explain what already John and Barbara alluded to, where the standards originated and why we are consulting on them. But when you physically go to the list of all the 20 standards, you can pick up one of your interest. And then when you finish reading, depending on your browser settings, you may be prompted automatically through the pop-up survey. You'll be prompted to answer a few questions, and there are only a few questions, 4 in total, actually. John already explained what we'll be asking about. We're asking about the relevant and appropriate of learning outcomes, and we are asking about appropriateness of the level. We are asking if the standards are fit for purpose, and we are also asking that if we have missed anything, to please tell us, and we'll be happy, of course, to amend the standards. So depending on the browser, you have the pop-up survey that may open for you automatically. If this doesn't open for you, below the standard at the very end, you have an access to a link. If you click to a link, you will access the survey. If for whatever reason you would like to submit your own feedback, you are very much welcome to do so using basically email address. There's a specific email address, consultation@qqy.ie. And you can send it to us, and we'll, of course, acknowledge and be very happy to receive feedback this way as well. As John mentioned, we also have implementation guidelines, and the implementation guidelines comprises 7 different sections. And those sections, as already was mentioned, basically cover development and review, awards classes, awards type, then access transfer progression, assessment grading, titling convention. At the end of each section, again, you will be prompted to access a very short survey. Actually, there are 2 questions to be there, and you can answer them. Basically, it's really if you are agreeing, if you are happy, if everything is covered in this section in terms of guidelines, and if you are not happy, please provide the answer why. And that's it. So under each section, you will find this very, very short survey. Under how to respond section on the website, if for whatever reason you are unclear, there's also a very short video where John kindly explained in 2-minute presentation how to respond to the survey. Thank you very much for your attention. We very much look forward to hearing from you. And I'm going to pass over to our special guest today, Sarah Barron from Kilkenny-Carlow ETB, who is going to share with us today their experience with piloting the draft Broad Award standards for the development of their innovative program. And I'm going to hand over to Sarah. Thank you.
Thanks, Beata. Thanks for your introduction. I'm just waiting for the presentation to load. I hope technology doesn't let me. And I just want to thank QQI for inviting us along this morning to give an overview of our experience of implementing the broad standards in the development of a recent programme that we developed. And this programme was the Level 3 Special Purpose Award in Learning to Support Children in Primary School. The presentation is going to provide an overview of how the need for the programme was identified, the development process and the implementation of the broad standards in the programme development process. The need for the award was identified through a number of areas, namely the necessity to increase certification outcomes in family learning programmes. It was also founded in specific policy development areas, and John has already alluded to some of these policy development areas, namely the FET strategy 2020 to 2024, which identified family learning as an effective means of diversifying literacy and numeracy provision. The Adult Literacy for Life strategy, which sets out the necessity to grow family literacy and family learning approaches as part of a targeted programme of support for health, social care and family support interventions. And in addition, the Enabling Learning Guidelines, the Enabling Intergenerational Learning Guidelines and Background Report on family literacy practices in Irish ETBs, which noted the potential for devising short QQI modules on elements of modules that match family literacy purposes. So that identification of need was something that was brought to us through our at provider level, and something that we looked at then how we would actually meet that need. The development process itself commenced in January 2022 with Kilkenny Carlow ETB and Limerick Clare ETB meeting initially to progress the idea of developing the award. We subsequently put out a call through our quality network, which is managed through ETBI, where 8 other ETBs expressed an interest in being part of the process. These were Donegal ETB, Dublin Dunleary ETB, Kerry ETB, Laois Offaly ETB, MS Mayo Sligo Leitrim ETB, Tipperary ETB, Cavan Monaghan ETB, and Louth Meath ETB. So from those ETBs, a team of 11 people with a broad range of expertise and roles commenced work on the award in February. These expertise range from subject matter experts in the areas of literacy and family learning, adult literacy organisers, quality assurance officers and managers, and also, I suppose, anyone that could support us in that was drawn in at that juncture. The breadth of membership ensured that a broad range of perspectives were considered in the development process. There were 4 core areas identified following initial consultation with teaching staff. These areas mainly focused on supporting parents in their role as primary educators of their children in areas such as literacy, numeracy, and digital literacy. The proposed outcome from parents having participated in the programme was that they would increase their confidence and demystify what is learned at school by their children, and thus supporting them on their lifelong learning journey. Extensive consultation took part as part of the process in line with the requirements of the validation process. This was to ensure the group had sought and taken into account the views of stakeholders. This consultation ranged from teaching staff, learners, parents, local and national agencies working in the area, and practitioners on the ground. The feedback received was taken on board and modifications were made as required. The broad standards were also taken into consideration in the development of the award. QQI was consulted during the initial development of the award. A meeting took place with QQI in March to discuss the rationale for the development of the award, and at this meeting, QQI informed us that a review was underway of the Level 1 to 4 award standards, with the intention of providing broad standards that would better support providers when developing programmes. QQI provided us with copies of the draft broad standards, and the development team were requested to pilot the implementation of the broad standards in the development of the programme. A shared curriculum approach was implemented in the development process. Given the breadth of ETBs involved, this would facilitate us to collaborate in the development of the programme. A revised programme descriptor was provided which comprehended the broad standards, and I've given you a copy on the screen here that you can see what that actually looks like in the programme descriptor. We were asked when we were given this template to identify the standard, the level, and the standard priority for the programme in the template. In considering which standard to use, we went back to the start in terms of what the initial feedback received from teaching staff had given us around what core areas needed to be included in the award. I'm now going to go through the standard selected and provide a rationale for the ranking attached to the standard in the descriptor. The literacy broad standard was given a number 1 priority. The award is primarily literacy focused. In addition, the feedback received throughout the process was that parents needed to be supported to understand what is learned in school by their child so that they can support children's learning at home. As already mentioned, the hope would be that this award would demystify what's learned at school, encouraging parents to see how they can be a vital support to their children's learning, both before they go to school and after. The purpose of the literacy broad standard, as you can see on screen, is to enable the learner to develop the relevant skills, the relevant knowledge, skills and competency in identifying, understanding, expressing, creating and interpreting concepts, facts and opinions in both oral and written forms, using visual, sound, audio and digital materials across disciplines and contexts. So as you can see, that is very applicable to the literacy context within which we were trying to operate. The next standard that we chose was the personal, social and learning to learn standard. The purpose of this standard is to support the design of a variety of programmes, enabling the learner to develop the relevant personal, social and learning to learn knowledge, skills and competency. As John mentioned, the lifelong learning approaches at levels 1 to 4 are very much embedded in that space. And as such, when we were picking this award, we were conscious to pick this standard. We were conscious that the award, by its nature, is a very personal piece for parents. The key aim is to support parents in their role as primary educators and enhance their understanding of the education system, and thus build their confidence to engage in further education if they wish to do so. So that was the one that we picked second. The third one that we ranked was the broad standard in mathematical and numeracy. The purpose of this standard is enabling learners to develop the relevant mathematical and numerical knowledge, skills and competence in order to solve a range of problems in everyday situations. The challenges experienced by parents when endeavouring to support their children founded the rationale for choosing this standard third. It was found that parents were struggling to support their children with their homework. This was identified by both the teaching staff and the schools consulted during the development process. It was found that these challenges had been exacerbated by homeschooling during the pandemic, and this program would aim to support parents to signpost where the spaces where they could get and seek support. The final standard that we ranked, which was number 4, was the digital standard. The purpose of this standard is to provide the digital knowledge, skills and competence. The digital competence involves the confident, critical and responsible use of and engagement with digital technologies for learning at work and for participation in society. It includes information and data literacy, communication and collaboration, media literacy, digital content creation, including programming, safety, including digital well-being, and competencies relating to cybersecurity, intellectual property related questions, problem solving and critical thinking. As you can see, that's quite a broad standard, and we very much felt at the consultation phase that teaching staff referenced the key targets set out in the Adult Literacy for Life strategy as a key goal in the inclusion of the digital competency in the award, but also the necessity to build an awareness building piece for parents around the safety requirements in an online space and how to engage in digital content being provided by in the school setting. I just want to thank everyone, I suppose, for coming along and listening to my presentation today. In conclusion, this was a positive experience in terms of engaging with the broad standards. As mentioned by previous speakers, the rationale for the development of these broad standards is to support flexibility and innovation in the design of programmes in teaching, learning and assessment. Well, it is necessary to acknowledge that the engagement with the broad standards in this instance was quite light touch. Due to this being a parallel process, we were developing the award while QQI were developing the broad standards. We can see how the implementation of the standards would support flexibility and innovation in the design programmes and in teaching, learning and assessment into the future. Thank you. Not sure if there's any questions, Beata.
Yes, thank you very much, Sarah. It was a very interesting presentation. If there are any direct questions to Sarah, Sarah will be happy to take them now before we go to the other Q questions that you might like to ask. And we've already have some post in chat. We've received also some. I will hand over to Barbara. Barbara will continue chairing this meeting. And if there are any questions, please let us know.
Now, I've just unmuted the mics and cameras are permissible so people can turn on to answer the question. Okay.
I was talking to myself there for a minute. Thanks a million. I don't know why. Thanks, Beata, and thanks, Sarah, for that. As Sarah said, we were working on these broad standards, and then when Sarah approached us, it seemed appropriate to actually ask Sarah to work with us on this, on the basis, or certainly in terms of what she was doing at BASE, because of the innovation in that programme that she outlined. And similar programmes were also being developed elsewhere. And previously, programmes of a similar but different nature, certainly a different field area, have been validated by QQI. And as I mentioned earlier, this was one of the reasons which, for us at least, validated what we were trying to do, to provide some reference point in addition to the framework standards to enable this to be further developed. So on the base of what you've heard, if there's any questions, I'd like to try to get as many people now involved in the conversation as possible. I seen a face there for a moment and it slipped back. If they deliberately put themselves up there, can they do it again? Or I'm looking for hands or questions. I don't see any. People, if anybody wishes to bring it to my attention. But we anticipate that there's plenty of questions in there. We got
Barbara,
a few. Yes.
We have a question in the chat. Sorry, we have a question already, one in the chat from Alan, asking us if we could go through the process of what occurs if a consultation participant perceives a gap in an award standard. How is that perceived gap assessed and by whom? So I understand this is a core. We of course understand that the gaps might be identified, and that's why will be very happy if they're found, because we want those standards to last for a good while in the future. Want to be them to be good, reliable standards. But Alan is asking, how really is that perceived gap assessed and by whom? And this is question to us.
I might jump in on that one just while you have it there. I think it's a great question. And if Alan wants to take the floor and ask it himself to make sure that we have it, but I'll have a cut at it. But I mean, I thought I'll be drawing a bit on what Sarah said, but qualification standards are not program standards. Now, that doesn't mean that there can be still gaps in them. So when we're asking you to look at these award standards, we're saying as a national award standard, is there something missed? Have we missed some area of knowledge, skill, and competence that we think is crucial? And you can tell us there in the consultation, and based on what people might say about a gap in the award standard, we'll have to address it in terms of going back out to the community who understand this area well, and the QQI aren't the experts. We go back to the experts and we say, there's evidence here that people say some particular knowledge, skill, and competence is not obvious in the standard, and we need to address that issue in a qualification standard. But there can be, that's a national qualification standard. But I mean, Sarah's kind of explained there, when she gets the experts around developing the program, yes, the standard's a good reference point, but there will be learning outcomes in Sarah's programs and other programs where you'll see that learning outcome is not in the award standard, but this group of people have come together and say, this is a really useful learning outcome or piece of knowledge and skill for this cohort of learners that we're dealing with. And that's addressed in the program design, and in validation then makes a decision to say, this provider has said this is a really useful learning. They're using this standard, but have identified this particular skill or competence or area of knowledge, which is really important. There's good evidence for it. And on that basis, the validation approves that in the program. So these are perhaps, unlike common award standards, these broad standards are not program specifications. These are award standards or national award standards. And so you'd look at it and say, well, is there something we want in the national award standard that absolutely should be in there? And that all programs should be potentially interested in. Does it have that kind of importance? But there's a lot of discretion and autonomy. So you have the framework, you have the award standards, you have programs, and there's enough of a line of consistency going down through that, but it's not absolute, it's not high fidelity kind of a system. And there's scope for innovation within the framework of a broad standards to develop the program. And so it depends where the gap might be. Is it a program gap which can be developed ideally by providers, is addressed by providers because they're the experts, they have access to expertise. They have access to employer networks or users of qualifications. So program design is central to this piece of activity, but the award standards should give sufficient guidance and definitely are not intended to get in the way of innovation or hamper the kind of innovation that Sarah's been leading in her provider. But if I misunderstood, Alan, just, I mean, if anyone has a question, take the floor and make sure we understand the question properly. But that'll be my cut at that one.
Thanks, John. That's very clear. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John. I see another one there from Denise Griffin. How will the award standards be verified? If Denise wants to come in, a lot of what John says in some ways answers that question in terms of the community of practice. But if you would like to enhance it, Denise, I'm just giving you the opportunity in case you would, whether we answered it or not. John, what do you think?
Do I see that question someplace? Or can you say, how will awards be verified? So, okay, I'm not sure. I don't know if Denise is on the call, we can have it, but I mean, yeah, you have standards, and there is an issue and a challenge sometimes for QQI. You have a qualification standard, you got program design, and we are the quality assurance body, and we're the awarding body, and we have to be satisfied that a standard is broadly reflected in the program, delivered in terms of how it's delivered by the provider, assessed by the provider, and on that basis we certify. So when we issue a certify, which is maybe a verification that an award has been done, so when we issue a certificate, we're saying we're confident that that provider has delivered that validated program as expected. They've administered their assessments in accordance with their quality assurance. Teaching and delivery has been consistent with their quality assurance procedures. They've gone through the internal and external authentication verification process, and on that basis, we're satisfied to verify. But so I suppose that's, you have the standard, you have the validation process, which is critical because that elaborates the standard. So a validation is an elaboration of an instance specific of a version of that award standard. But it's this instance, like Sarah has developed a unique program responding to a unique learning need for a unique group of learners. And there's a huge amount of richness in understanding that constituency and developing that program. The award is elaborated in the program. It's delivered under agreed quality assurance systems, and it's verified by QQI, who have to confirm that a learner has met the standard of knowledge, skill, and competence. I mean, that's in our legislation. We certify on the basis that we've confirmed that a learner has met the relevant standard of knowledge, skill, and competence. So there's a few different pieces in there and how an award, I suppose, is verified, but it might give you some idea on it, or anyone else can jump in on that.
Thanks, John. Denise came back and said thank you. So that seems to be appropriate in our interpretation of the question. And as John says, the standard or the reference standard is one thing. The validation process, and I think everybody on the call has been involved in it to some degree, is where in a sense the verification or validation or whatever approach you're taking is actually finalised. And recommendations may even follow as a part of that process. Any more questions or comments even? Please feel free. It's an opportunity. Or part of the consultation process may not be clear, or the documentation, and this will be an opportunity for you to raise it. Please do by the chat, if you so wish.
Barbara, we have received a couple of questions submitted to us in advance. I'm not sure, maybe not everyone who submitted the question is on the call today. One of the questions that we, I think, already addressed, but if I may, was actually pertaining to the use of learning outcomes. So basically the question was, will all the learning outcomes listed in the given standard have to be addressed, for example, in a short program leading to a minor or special purpose award? And again, as John already explained in his presentation, no, not all, and Barbara as well confirmed this, no, not all learning outcomes have to be used. A provider can decide on an appropriate number of learning outcomes that will reflect the credit value of the target award. So it can be minor, or it can be major, or special purpose, whatever. So it's up to the provider. So it's possibility to mix and match. And as it was evident in Sarah's presentation in the innovative program for family learning modules, for example, in this particular program, it's been in the development of this program has been informed by 4 different broad award standards. But as John said, you will see that there are learning outcomes that they will not be in those standards as well. So this is where we are navigating between award standards and the program standards.
Thanks a million, Beata. Thanks for that. And there were a few questions received in advance, and some of them I think we've answered. I'm not too sure we've answered all of them, but a lot of them seem to imply a current understanding of the CAS and what was different between the CAS and what this offer is, basically. And it is a new proposition, as everybody has mentioned, and it does give more freedom to yourselves to develop the qualification in reality. And the standards are reference, and you can use one or more of them, but it must obviously be coherent, and that's where the validation process comes in. That will, in a sense, verify, as the term used in the question, that the program is coherent and that the award can be made. The program validated and the award can be made. But the provider has the opportunity to determine basically the qualification and determine whether that qualification should have minor awards in it, for example. All CAS qualifications or major awards have minor awards built into them. So we are collectively used to that. But new awards under this process can be a single award with no minors. It can have minors. The minors can be as you design them, as you create them. And the guiding documents as part of the consultation attempts to explain this. And if there's any question about that different model, because the creativity there is the difference, I think, at least in terms of the CAS model, which is very, very structured. It stood the test of time. People and learners accumulate components over time and so forth. This is a different model, and the provider can facilitate accumulation by building in minors, but it's not mandatory. It's not mandatory as in the CAS. So it can be different or it can be the same, but the option is the providers based on what they see. They may start with us with the small part of the award and then add to it over time. So it varies. What happens if you want to develop a program in an area that ain't a new award standard? John, Beata, would you like to comment on that?
Well, we are facilitating that at the moment. I don't know if Walter's on the call, he can pop in, but we are facilitating that, and we recognize that things are fast moving and there are useful areas of knowledge, skill, and competence that people need for various functions or activities. And a provider comes to us and says, I mean, in the green area, for example, sustainability, there's a lot of fast moving areas there. And we haven't been able to keep up in terms of award standards, for sure. But we can facilitate the development of those programs, in which case the owners of those programs will more likely be using the generic award type descriptors, looking at level descriptors, award type descriptors, which really help to level a program. And that's a decision in validation. Is this program at this level? So there are broad generic standards in the framework which can be used to level a qualification or proposed qualification. But then the issue is, so validation kind of makes a few decisions about the capacity of the provider to deliver the program, about the leveling, title, award type, those kind of technical things to make sure a program is tied in with the framework. But validation also makes a call on the relevance of a program. And if you have an award standard, it's giving you something on the relevance. It's telling you about the relevant learning outcomes. But in the absence of that, then a validation exercise is looking at the relevance. Is this a useful program for somebody to do? And how would you know that? By having consulted with users of that. So they could be the social partners, they could be regulators, they could be looking at SOLAS supply and demand for skills or whatever it might be. But there's a credible body of evidence to say there's a demand for this program. And so in the absence of a QQI standard, other objective sources of evidence on the demand for skills and the demand for it to lead to a qualification is perfectly acceptable through a validation exercise. So we're not trying to get in the way on, we're not saying, no, we've no standards, you can't develop a program in that area, because that's simply hindering useful innovation, which is something we're trying to avoid.
Thanks a million, John. Thank you for that. I'm just keeping track of the chat now. And the answers come back perfect from the questioner rather. Any more? Alison has her hand up. I see a hand up. Alison, would you like to come in on the conversation? Is she enabled?
Yeah, should be. Just 1 minute. I'll try again. Yeah, the controls is with Alison.
I can see that Alison is not muted anymore.
No.
Alison, can you hear us? And we also have Walter, Barbara.
All right.
See Walter's hand.
Sorry, Alison, if it's on our side. It appears unmuted. If you want to write something into the chat to let us know your problem or issue. Walter, do you want to come in?
Yeah, maybe just to talk a little bit about the intervening piece between the standards and the award, mainly about validation and then certification. To quickly fill you in on what's already happening, has been happening without these standards in validation. We've had quite a number of programs this year submitted for validation where there was no CAS award at the end. So the program is submitted for validation with learning outcomes identified in the program, which are mapped to the award type descriptor at a level. So basically what's happening there is a provider is presenting a new program and they're making the case that what's in this program is at a particular level and deserves an award, if you like, at that level. Now, the majority of them have been special purpose awards, but we've just recently had one for a brand new major award, which was mapped directly to the framework. Now, that is great in the sense that it allows innovation, it allows new programs, and it allows the creation of new awards. And those awards are based on a title presented by the provider. What these new standards will do, and what I think that their great contribution will be to sit between the framework and the program, and to add some more information to the providers when developing a program, which will be informed by best practice and national standards. Instead of just relying on the bare level indicators, it will be the level indicators plus information about whichever of those broad standards they choose. And they can then inform the development of program learning outcomes, which will go through validation. And if, as both Sarah and John have described, if the validation process says that, yes, there is a rationale for this program, there is a demand for the program, there will be a benefit for learners in doing it, and what is proposed does correspond to a framework award level and also to national standards. That will enhance the validation process, and there will be a program validated leading to a brand new award which is linked to that program. And Sarah's program is an example of one which overall leads to a special purpose award, but embedded within it there are 4 minor awards, again brand new, each with their own title and each with their own award if learners only want to do a piece of the program. So that's what validation will do, and it will be enhanced by the availability of these new standards. What we want to work on still, and I think any views on it would be helpful, is the relationship between a program title and an award title, because they're not always the same thing. A program is basically about what you want to make or what do you want to offer to a learner. And it's often described as an attractive proposition, if you like. This is our program. But you also have to think, what does the learner want to take away at the end of it? What should be the award title? And how do the standards used influence that title? Because ideally there will be a link, and they are two different things. And we are having trouble, if you like, with some of the programs. A program title can be very long to make it well understood and well marketed, but a very long program title does not make a good award title, and there are limits to the lengths of our awards. So that's one thing we have to work out, and that then will feed into certification. What actually appears on the cert for the learner, and is there a connection between the standards used, because there are potentially a mix of standards, which is a good thing because it can inform different aspects of the program, but also how that's reflected in the award title. So there are things still to be teased out in the overall implementation of this, but it's already up and running. Say we will have a panel evaluating Sarah and her colleagues' program early in the new year, and hopefully there will be a new program validated, and new awards available to learners in that family literacy area. But just to reinforce that point around what will those qualifications say for those learners, and just to emphasize the point in program development to think of the difference between the program title and an appropriate award title. But yeah, that was just to try and flesh out the validation piece and the certification, because this all has to work end to end, from the publication of the standards to the development of the program to the validation of the program, creation of an award, and then certification of that award. It's one continuous thing, and it has to all fit together in a consistent way. Okay, that's enough for me. Thanks.
Thanks a million, Walter, for elaborating that, particularly on the validation, because that's a key feature of the standards. It's a two-sided coin. The reference standard, which is what it is, your development, and then the approval validation process, which Walter outlined. And some of the items identified by Walter there, titling in particular, which is referenced in the documentation for consultation, is something we would like some feedback on. Alison came in there with the questions, assessing herself as coming from a special school and delivering a level 3 program has been hugely successful for our learners and easy for parents to recognise on the NFQ, and I presume that includes titling as well, referencing Walter's point. What frame of reference will there be going forward? Does anybody, John or Beata, want to add anything to that? I think we've covered it in a lot of what's been said and what Walter said there. But the emphasis being that if you're making specific reference to a current CAS standard, well, then that is not being, at the moment, changed in any way. We will review this CAS, as I mentioned, over time, but at the moment it is as ill. Some of it, I accept, from the standard point of view, could be dated. A lot of the CAS awards are dated. They are due for review. But other than that, what the offer is should enhance the option. And maybe, just maybe, you will see some other possibilities in terms of the options provided within the 20 broad standards for further programme development. So it may add more for the learners. Well, that's our hope, at least. It may add more from the learners based on your own design or with stakeholders and maybe even with parents getting involved. I'm just conscious of time as well, and people are leaving and other meetings going on. New messages I see. Has somebody got a new message? Somebody's leaving. Thank you. How long has it taken from initial consultation to the valid? Sarah, that's for you if they'd like a time on it. The program's in the process of being in the validation process at the moment. How long has it taken? I don't know whether Sarah has.
We commenced it.
Sorry. No,
yeah, no, can you hear me, Barbara?
Yeah,
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, We commenced the development process in February 2022, and we submitted the programme for validation in July 2022. So QQI are going through their the initial screening process, the feedback, modifications, etc. And as Walter mentioned in his input, we have been appointed a panel with the hope that they will meet and put forward recommendations or approve the award in January. So shy of a year, I suppose you would say, pending that the January timeframe from QQI perspective. So just shy of a year.
Thanks a million, Sarah. And in terms of Sarah's development, it came at the same time as the reference standards. The offer now is that there is reference standards out there, and that the validation will be, in a sense, within the provider's remit in terms of time. But at least there's not a two-stage process. We have to develop standards, or QQI does, and then the validation. In this particular case, with these broad standards, when the standards are finally finished and complete, the time is basically in the investment of developing the program. Walter?
Yeah, just to say, to echo Sarah's point there, that is an accurate description of the timeline for that program. But just to say it's not necessarily the case that all will take that long. We did ask Sarah to amend the program to reflect the standards. That was, if we had gone ahead with the original application, which didn't necessarily reference the standards in the program documentation, and just used the level indicators as other programs had, it would have been probably validated by now. But we did ask for further cooperation from Sarah and our colleagues to reflect the standards, because we are trying to see how they will work in practice in terms of the validation process, how they will be reflected. So it is the case that it's been the guts of a year for this program, but we have had other programs go through the validation process much more quickly. So don't assume that it's going to take a year just because it has to come through validation, because that is not a normal benchmark. We're still working to 25 to 26 weeks for a program validation process.
Thanks, Walter. Again, to be fair, developing qualifications programs does take time, and when the reference standards are there and we're all more used to them, it certainly will speed up the process of enabling people or providers to use one standard or more than one standard. So that's going to take time getting familiar with them. I think, like when the apprenticeship came out first, it took time to embed in. Now that's embedded in, people are developing programs back to back, basically. But as somebody said there, Fanula said their thing, it increases the offer to learners and the opportunity for providers, and maybe a fresh start for providers in terms of looking at their current offering of level 1 to 4 programs and seeing them in different lights with their own creativity in mind, as opposed to the restrictions of what's there at the moment. I'm just conscious of time. If there's any more questions, I suggest that maybe you contact us by email. We feel free. But I do think I'm going to have to draw this meeting to a close, if that's all right. As long as it's open, you can still put in questions to the chat and so forth. Olga has just put up the consultation link again. We really do welcome your feedback through the consultation process. And as Sarah said, she made contact with us, so she surfaced herself and we became interested. Same goes with any of people here interested in developing programs with the use of these. Please identify yourself to us and we will be able to assist the process while you're doing it, because we are interested in further pilots. Is that all right? Everybody happy again? I wish I could see your faces, but next time, hopefully, or sometime in the future.
Thanks, everyone.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Megan.
Happy Christmas.
Thanks.